I was sitting in my living room, watching Emma work on her algebra homework, her dark hair falling across her face as she concentrated. At 14, she had grown into such a beautiful, intelligent young woman. It was hard to believe that 11 years ago, my sister Stephanie had abandoned this precious little girl on my doorstep with nothing but a hastily scribbled note. Those years of raising Emma as my own had been the most challenging yet rewarding of my life. We had built something beautiful together, just the two of us in our cozy little house in Oregon. I never could have imagined that our peaceful world was about to be shattered. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I am about to share will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you will want to hear every single detail of how my entitled sister tried to destroy our family and ended up losing everything herself. 11 years ago, I was 25 years old and working as a junior accountant when my sister Stephanie showed up at my apartment at 2 in the morning. She was 23, then holding 3-year-old Emma, who was fast asleep in her arms. I will never forget the look on Stephanie's face that night. She was pale, exhausted, and had clearly been crying. Stephanie had gotten pregnant with Emma when she was just 19. The father, Kyle, was some guy she had met at a party who disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy. From day one, I could tell that Stephanie was not ready for motherhood. She would call me constantly begging me to babysit so she could go out with friends. I did not mind helping because Emma was such a sweet child, but I started to notice that Stephanie was spending more and more time away from home. That final night, Stephanie placed sleeping Emma on my couch and handed me a crumpled piece of paper. All it said was, "I cannot do this anymore. Please take care of her. I am sorry." Before I could even process what was happening, Stephanie was gone. I ran outside in my pajamas, but her car was already pulling out of the parking lot. I spent the next week frantically trying to reach her. I called her phone dozens of times, but it went straight to voicemail. I contacted her friends, checked her apartment, and even filed a missing person report with the police. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, I had a traumatized 3-year-old who kept asking for her mommy, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. I had to quit my full-time job because I could not afford daycare on my salary. Instead, I took on multiple part-time positions, working early mornings at a bakery and evenings cleaning offices while Emma slept. Money was incredibly tight. There were nights when I would lie awake wondering how I was going to pay rent or buy groceries, but seeing Emma's innocent smile made every sacrifice worth it. Slowly but surely, we found our rhythm. Emma was remarkably resilient for such a young child. She never seemed angry about her mother leaving, perhaps because she was too young to fully understand what had happened. She started calling me Aunt Gracie, and within a few months, I had legally become her guardian. As the years passed, Emma and I grew closer than I ever thought possible. I was there for her first day of kindergarten, her first loose tooth, her first bike ride without training wheels. We had our own little traditions like pancakes every Saturday morning and movie nights on Fridays. I helped her with homework, attended every school play and soccer game, and held her when she had nightmares. When Emma turned 8, I finally landed a stable position at the local bank. The pay was decent enough that we could move into a small but comfortable house with a yard where Emma could play. Life was not luxurious by any means, but we were happy. Emma never asked about her mother anymore. When friends at school would ask about her parents, she would simply say that I was her mom, and that was the truth, as far as both of us were concerned. By the time Emma reached middle school, she had blossomed into an incredible young woman. She was on the honor roll, played on the school soccer team, and had a close group of friends. Teachers constantly praised her maturity and kindness. She would often tell me, "You are my real mom," whenever the subject of Stephanie came up, which was rarely. Our life was simple, but fulfilling. We lived in a small town where everyone knew each other, and we had built a wonderful community around us. Emma loved helping me in the garden on weekends, and we had started talking about college plans even though she was only in 8th grade. I had saved every penny I could for her education, and while it was not much, I was determined to give her every opportunity possible. Looking back now, I realize those were the happiest years of my life. Emma and I had created something precious together, a bond that I thought nothing could break. We were not just aunt and niece anymore. We were mother and daughter in every way that mattered. Little did I know that our peaceful existence was about to be turned completely upside down. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in October when our lives changed forever. Emma and I were working in the front garden planting bulbs for next spring when a pristine white BMW X7 pulled up to our curb. The car looked so out of place in our modest neighborhood that several neighbors stopped their yard work to stare. The driver's door opened and out stepped a woman I barely recognized. She had blonde hair styled perfectly, was wearing what looked like a designer pantsuit, and had expensive jewelry sparkling on her wrists and neck. It took me a full 30 seconds to realize I was looking at my sister Stephanie. Behind her emerged a distinguished-looking man in his mid-40s, wearing a tailored suit and polished leather shoes. He had salt and pepper hair and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. Two teenagers followed a girl about 16 with perfectly straight blonde hair and a boy around 12, both dressed like they had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Emma looked up from the flowers we were planting, dirt still on her hands, and stared at the strangers approaching our front gate. I could see the confusion in her eyes as Stephanie's face lit up with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "Emma," Stephanie said softly, her voice catching slightly. "My beautiful daughter, I have missed you so much." Emma instinctively moved closer to me, clearly uncomfortable with this stranger who claimed to know her. The man placed his hand possessively on Stephanie's shoulder and smiled what I immediately recognized as a practiced corporate smile. "You must be Grace," he said, extending his hand. "I am Richard Sterling. Stephanie has told me so much about you and Emma." I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my gardening gloves, trying to process what was happening. The two teenagers hung back by the car, whispering to each other and looking at Emma like she was some sort of curiosity. "This is Madison and Tyler," Richard continued, gesturing to his children. "They have been so excited to meet their new sister." The word sister hit me like a punch to the stomach. Emma looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes, clearly overwhelmed by this sudden intrusion into our quiet weekend. Stephanie knelt down to Emma's level, her designer clothes seemingly impractical for the dirt and grass. "I know this is confusing, sweetheart, but I am your mother. I have come back for you." Emma's response was immediate and clear. "Grace is my mother," she said firmly, taking my hand. "I do not know who you are." The hurt that flashed across Stephanie's face seemed genuine, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Richard placed a supportive hand on her back, and I noticed how the gesture seemed both protective and controlling. "Perhaps we could go inside and talk," Richard suggested. "There is a lot to discuss, and I think we all want what is best for Emma." Against my better judgment, I invited them in. Our small living room suddenly felt cramped with all these people and their overwhelming presence. Madison and Tyler perched on the edge of our second-hand couch, like they were afraid of catching something, while Richard's eyes swept around our modest home with what I could only describe as polite disdain. Stephanie launched into her explanation with practiced ease. She had gotten her life together, she said. She had met Richard 2 years ago, and they had married after a whirlwind romance. Richard was the CEO of a successful tech company based in Seattle, and they lived in a beautiful home with every amenity imaginable. She was ready to be a mother now, she insisted, and she wanted Emma to be part of their new family. Emma listened to all of this with increasing skepticism. When Stephanie finished her speech, Emma looked directly at her and said, "Where have you been for 11 years?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Stephanie's carefully composed expression faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "I was young and scared," she admitted. "I was not ready to be the mother you deserved. But I am ready now, and I can give you everything you could ever want." As if to prove her point, Richard retrieved several expensive-looking bags from their car. They had brought gifts, the latest iPhone designer clothes in Emma's size, a top-of-the-line laptop, and jewelry that probably cost more than I made in a month. Emma examined the gifts politely, but with obvious discomfort. She accepted the phone and a few smaller items, clearly not wanting to be rude, but her body language remained defensive throughout the entire encounter. The next few weeks fell into an uncomfortable pattern. Stephanie and Richard would arrive every Saturday afternoon, always bearing expensive gifts and grand plans for Emma's future. They talked about private schools, college funds, European vacations, and opportunities that I could never provide. Madison and Tyler's attitude toward Emma was complex. In front of the adults, they were welcoming and friendly, calling her their sister, and including her in conversations about their privileged lifestyle. But I noticed how they exchanged looks when Emma talked about her friends or activities at our local public school. There was a subtle condescension that Emma picked up on immediately. Richard, meanwhile, had begun making comments about our situation that left me feeling defensive and inadequate. He would mention how limiting small-town life could be for a bright girl like Emma, how important it was to expose children to culture and opportunities, how a good education required significant financial investment. "Not that there is anything wrong with the life you have provided," he would always add, but the implication was clear. In his mind, I was holding Emma back from reaching her full potential. Emma, to her credit, remained loyal and skeptical throughout these visits. She was polite but distant with Stephanie, and while she seemed slightly intrigued by the wealth and luxury being offered, she never wavered in her devotion to me and our life together. But I could see the pressure building. Emma was 14, and naturally curious about the world beyond our small town. The gifts, the talk of private schools and college funds, the promise of a life without financial worries, all of it was designed to make our modest existence seem insufficient. After about 6 weeks of these Saturday visits, Stephanie suggested that Emma should start spending weekends at their mansion in Seattle. It would give them a chance to bond as a family, she argued, and Emma could experience the lifestyle they were offering firsthand. I felt trapped. I could not forbid these visits without seeming unreasonable, especially since Emma was curious enough to want to try it. But every instinct I had screamed that something was wrong with this whole situation. Stephanie's sudden return after 11 years of complete absence felt calculated rather than genuine. Still, I agreed to let Emma spend one weekend with them. She came home with stories about their enormous house, the heated pool, the home theater, and the housekeeper who cooked gourmet meals every night. But she also mentioned how Madison and Tyler had made jokes about our tiny house, and how Richard had questioned her about whether she was truly happy living with me. It was becoming clear that this was not just about Stephanie wanting to reconnect with her daughter. This was a systematic campaign to convince Emma that her life with me was somehow lacking, that she deserved better than what I could provide. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday evening in December. Emma was upstairs doing homework when I heard the familiar sound of Richard's BMW pulling into our driveway. This was unusual because they typically only visited on weekends, and they had not called ahead. Stephanie and Richard came to the door looking more formal and serious than I had ever seen them. Richard was carrying a leather briefcase, and Stephanie's usual bright smile was replaced by a determined expression that I remembered all too well from our childhood. "We need to have a serious conversation, Grace," Stephanie announced as they settled into our living room. "About Emma's future." Richard opened his briefcase and removed a stack of legal documents. "We have been thinking a lot about what is best for Emma," he began in his smooth corporate voice, "and we believe it is time for her to come live with us permanently." The words hit me like ice water. "Excuse me. Think about it logically," Stephanie jumped in. "I am her biological mother. I can provide her with opportunities that you simply cannot." private school tutors, college preparation travel, cultural experiences. Everything a bright girl like Emma needs to succeed in today's competitive world. Richard slid the papers across our coffee table. These are custody transfer documents. We have had our lawyers prepare everything. The process would be quite simple, actually. Stephanie is Emma's legal mother, and you have been essentially babysitting for the past 11 years. The word babysitting felt like a slap across my face. 11 years of sacrifice, love, sleepless nights, and devotion reduced to babysitting. We want to compensate you, of course, Richard continued smoothly, for your time and expenses over the years. We are prepared to offer you a substantial sum to help you get back on your feet and pursue your own life. I stared at them in disbelief. You think you can buy Emma? We are not buying anyone. Stephanie said, her voice taking on the edge I remembered from when we were children, and she did not get her way. I am her mother. I have rights. And frankly, Grace, you have had your chance to raise her. Now it is time for Emma to have the life she deserves. That was when Emma appeared at the top of the stairs. She had obviously been listening to the entire conversation because her face was flushed with anger and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I do not want to go anywhere, she said firmly, walking down the stairs and standing beside my chair. Grace is my real mother. She is the one who raised me, who was there when I was sick, who helped me with homework, who taught me how to ride a bike. Where were you? Stephanie stood up, her composure finally cracking. I am your mother, Emma. I gave birth to you. I know I made mistakes when I was young, but I am ready now. Richard and I can give you everything. I do not want everything, Emma shot back. I want my real family, and that is Grace. Richard tried a different approach, his voice taking on a paternal tone. Emma, I understand this is difficult, but think about your future. We can send you to the best schools. You could go to Harvard or Yale. We can travel the world together. You would never have to worry about money or whether you can afford college. Money is not everything, Emma replied, her voice steady despite her tears. Grace saved every penny to help me go to college. She worked 2 jobs when I was little just to take care of me. She loves me, not what I can do for her. That last comment seemed to strike a nerve with Richard, whose composed expression flickered for just a moment. Stephanie's voice grew sharp. Grace cannot give you what we can give you. Look around, Emma. This tiny house, this small town, this limited life. Do you really want to throw away the chance for something better? This is not a limited life, Emma said fiercely. This is my life. This is my home. And Grace is my mother. The argument continued for another hour, with Stephanie and Richard becoming increasingly frustrated with Emma's refusal to consider their offer. Finally, they left with threats about legal action and claims that I had somehow brainwashed Emma against her real family. After they left, Emma and I sat on the couch together, both of us shaken by the confrontation. They are not going to give up, are they? Emma asked quietly. I wanted to reassure her, but I could not lie. I do not think so, sweetheart. That night I made a decision that would use up most of my savings, but felt absolutely necessary. I hired a private investigator to look into Richard Sterling and his marriage to my sister. Something about their sudden appearance and urgent desire to gain custody of Emma felt calculated, and I needed to understand what was really driving their behavior. The information my investigator uncovered was more disturbing than I had anticipated. Richard was indeed a successful CEO, but he was also in the middle of contentious divorce proceedings with his first wife, Margaret. She was fighting for full custody of Madison and Tyler, claiming that Richard was an unfit father who prioritized his business over his children. More importantly, the investigator discovered that Richard's company was under federal investigation for tax fraud. The case was still in its early stages, but there were allegations of significant financial improprieties that could result in criminal charges. But the most shocking revelation was about Stephanie herself. According to the investigator's sources, Stephanie had met Richard while he was still married to Margaret. She had deliberately pursued him knowing about his wealth and status. When Richard filed for divorce, Margaret had accused Stephanie of being a homewrecker who had destroyed their family. The timing of Stephanie's sudden interest in Emma was no coincidence. Richard needed to present himself as a stable family man for both his custody case and the federal investigation. Having a devoted wife who had reunited with her daughter would help create the image of a man who valued family and stability. Emma was not a daughter Stephanie had suddenly remembered loving. She was a prop in Richard's legal strategy. Armed with this information, I felt both relieved and terrified. Relieved because I finally understood what was really happening, but terrified because I realized how far Richard and Stephanie might be willing to go to get what they wanted. My fears were confirmed when Emma came home from school the following week, with news that a social worker had visited her classroom. Stephanie had filed a complaint alleging that I had kidnapped Emma and was keeping her from her biological mother. The social worker wanted to schedule a home visit to assess our living situation. Emma was mature beyond her years as she handled the social worker's questions. She calmly explained how Stephanie had abandoned her when she was 3 years old, how I had raised her ever since, and how she considered me to be her real mother in every way that mattered. The social worker seemed satisfied with our home and our relationship, but the complaint meant that our case would remain open for several months. Meanwhile, Richard was growing increasingly uncomfortable with Stephanie's obsession with gaining custody of Emma. According to my investigator, there had been several heated arguments between them about the wisdom of pursuing legal action against me. The breaking point came during Emma's 14th birthday party. I had planned a simple celebration at our house with Emma's school friends, just pizza cake and games in the backyard. It was exactly the kind of party Emma wanted, low-key and fun with the people who mattered most to her. We were about halfway through the party when Richard's BMW pulled up outside. Emma's face fell as she watched Stephanie and Richard emerge from the car, followed by Madison and Tyler. They were carrying elaborately wrapped gifts and wearing formal clothes that were completely inappropriate for a casual backyard party. "Surprise!" Stephanie called out as she approached our gate. We could not miss our daughter's special day. The contrast between Stephanie's expensive gifts and the modest presents Emma had received from her friends was stark and obviously intentional. Richard had brought a professional camera crew to document the moment, which made Emma visibly uncomfortable. "Next year we will celebrate in our mansion," Stephanie announced loudly enough for all of Emma's friends to hear. "With a real party, not this small-town affair." Emma's friend Sarah looked confused and hurt by the comment. These were her closest friends, and they had put thought and love into choosing gifts for Emma within their modest budgets. Madison and Tyler immediately began making snide comments about our cute little party and asking Emma's friends invasive questions about their families and homes. Tyler actually asked one boy if his parents owned their house or rented it, implying that renting was somehow shameful. I watched Emma's face as she realized what was happening. Stephanie and Richard were not here to celebrate her birthday. They were here to embarrass her in front of her friends and demonstrate how much better their lifestyle was compared to ours. When it came time to blow out the candles, Stephanie positioned herself right next to Emma and instructed Richard's photographer to capture the moment. Emma looked miserable as the camera flashed repeatedly. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Stephanie said sweetly. "Maybe wish for a family that can give you everything you deserve." That was when Emma reached her breaking point. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over, and faced Stephanie with tears of anger in her eyes. "Stop it," she said loudly. "Just stop trying to buy me. I already have a family. I already have a mother. And I do not want your money or your mansion or your fake concern." The backyard fell silent except for the sound of Richard's photographer continuing to take pictures of the confrontation. "Emma, do not be dramatic," Stephanie said dismissively. "I am trying to give you opportunities that Grace never could." "Grace gave me love," Emma shot back. "She gave me stability and security, and 11 years of putting my needs before her own. What have you given me except expensive things I never asked for?" Stephanie's mask of maternal concern finally slipped completely. "You are being an ungrateful little brat," she snapped. "I am your mother, and you will show me respect." Before I could react, Stephanie reached out and slapped Emma across the face. The sound seemed to echo in our small backyard. Emma's friends gasped in shock, and several of them instinctively moved closer to her. I immediately stepped between Stephanie and Emma, my own anger finally overwhelming the restraint I had been maintaining for months. "Get out," I said quietly but firmly. "Get out of my house and do not come back." Richard, who had been watching the entire scene unfold, finally spoke up. "Stephanie, that was completely inappropriate. We should leave." But Stephanie was beyond reason now. "She is my daughter," she screamed. "I have rights. You cannot keep her from me forever, Grace. I will take this to court. I will prove that you are an unfit guardian. Emma belongs with her real family." That was when Emma did something that surprised all of us. She walked over to the social worker's business card that was still sitting on our picnic table from the previous week's visit and picked up her phone. "Should I call Mrs. Peterson right now and tell her that my biological mother just slapped me at my birthday party?" Emma asked calmly. "Should I tell her that you have been harassing us for months and trying to force me to leave the only family I have ever known?" The threat was effective. Richard immediately grabbed Stephanie's arm and began pulling her toward their car. "We are leaving now," he said firmly. "This has gone far enough." As their BMW pulled away, Emma's friends gathered around her with hugs and words of support. Sarah, who was Emma's closest friend, said exactly what everyone was thinking. "Who was that crazy lady, and why did she think she could treat you like that?" Emma looked around at her friends at our modest backyard party at the simple life we had built together and smiled for the first time that afternoon. "She is nobody important," Emma said. "Just someone who does not understand what family really means." That evening, after Emma's friends had gone home and we were cleaning up the aftermath of the party, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Richard's number. "Grace, I want to apologize for what happened today," Richard said without preamble. "Stephanie's behavior was completely unacceptable, and I am ashamed that it happened at Emma's birthday party." I was surprised by his tone, which sounded genuinely remorseful, rather than his usual corporate smoothness. "I am also calling to tell you that we will not be pursuing custody of Emma any further," he continued. "I have instructed my lawyers to withdraw all legal filings, and Stephanie will not be contacting you again." "What changed your mind?" I asked. There was a long pause before Richard answered. "I realized that we were not acting in Emma's best interest. We were acting in our own interest, and that was wrong. Emma clearly loves you and considers you her mother. I would never want to force my own children to live somewhere they did not want to be." After I hung up, I felt a mixture of relief and curiosity about what had really motivated Richard's change of heart. The answer came 3 days later, when my private investigator called with an update. Margaret Sterling, Richard's ex-wife, had contacted me through the investigator. She wanted to share information about what had really been happening behind the scenes. Margaret Sterling turned out to be a thoughtful, articulate woman who had been married to Richard for 15 years before Stephanie destroyed their family. When we met for coffee, she explained how desperate Richard had become to present himself as a stable family man. "The federal investigation is more serious than most people realize," Margaret told me. "Richard could face significant jail time if he is convicted. His lawyers advised him that having a stable family image would be crucial for his defense." She went on to explain how Stephanie had manipulated Richard from the beginning of their relationship. Stephanie had researched Richard's background and deliberately positioned herself to meet him at a charity event where she knew he would be speaking. "Stephanie never loved Richard," Margaret said bluntly. "She loved his money and his status, and when she realized that having a daughter would make her seem more maternal and family-oriented, she decided to reclaim Emma." But Margaret's most important revelation was what had happened after Emma's birthday party. Madison and Tyler had finally told their father the truth about how Stephanie treated them when he was not around. "Stephanie was cruel to my children," Margaret explained. "She would make cutting remarks about their appearance, their intelligence, their loyalty to me. Richard was so infatuated that he refused to see it at first, but Madison finally broke down and told him everything. The birthday party incident had been the final straw. When Richard saw Stephanie slap Emma in front of witnesses, he realized that she was not the loving maternal figure she pretended to be. She was someone who viewed children as accessories to be displayed when convenient and discarded when they became inconvenient. Richard called me that night and apologized for everything," Margaret continued. "He admitted that he had been blinded by Stephanie's manipulation and that he was ready to end their marriage." Margaret also revealed that several other women had come forward with information about Stephanie's pattern of targeting wealthy men and breaking up their families. There was evidence that Emma was not Stephanie's first attempt to use a child as leverage in a relationship. "I wanted you to know the truth," Margaret concluded. "Emma is lucky to have you. You saved her from a woman who would have used her and discarded her just like she did with Richard's children." 2 weeks later, my investigator confirmed that Richard had filed for an annulment of his marriage to Stephanie, citing fraud and deception. Stephanie had been asked to leave the family home immediately. The investigation into Richard's company was still ongoing, but his cooperation with federal authorities and his decision to end his relationship with Stephanie had improved his legal position significantly. Meanwhile, Stephanie had apparently tried to contact several other wealthy men she had identified as potential targets, but word had spread about her manipulative behavior. The private investigators hired by these men had shared information about her pattern of using children to access wealth and status. Stephanie left Seattle alone, her dreams of a luxurious lifestyle shattered by her own greed and cruelty. She had lost both her new family and any chance of rebuilding a relationship with Emma. The social services case against me was officially closed when the social worker received a detailed report about the birthday party incident and Stephanie's history of child abandonment. The social worker noted in her final report that Emma was thriving in a loving, stable home and recommended that no further action be taken. Emma and I learned about most of these developments through my investigator, but we also heard directly from Madison and Tyler, who sent Emma a heartfelt letter apologizing for their behavior and thanking her for helping them find the courage to tell their father the truth about Stephanie. "You showed us what real courage looks like," Madison wrote. "We were so focused on protecting ourselves that we forgot about protecting each other. You never forgot who your real family was, even when they offered you everything we thought we wanted." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Emma and I could finally relax and return to our normal life. The months following Stephanie's departure were a time of healing and growth for both Emma and me. We had been through something traumatic together, but we had emerged stronger and more connected than ever. Emma threw herself back into her schoolwork and activities with renewed enthusiasm. She had missed several soccer practices during the worst of the custody drama, but her teammates and coach welcomed her back warmly. Her grades, which had slipped slightly during the stress of the past few months, quickly returned to their usual high standards. More importantly, Emma seemed to have gained a new maturity and perspective from the experience. She began expressing gratitude for things she had previously taken for granted: our quiet dinners together, our Saturday morning pancake tradition, even our modest little house that Stephanie had criticized so harshly. "I used to think about what it would be like to have more money," Emma told me one evening as we worked on her college applications. "But now I realize that we have something much more valuable. We have trust and loyalty and real love. Those people had lots of money, but they did not have what we have." The community response to our ordeal was overwhelmingly supportive. Word had spread about what happened at Emma's birthday party, and neighbors, teachers, and friends reached out to offer encouragement and assistance. Emma's soccer coach mentioned that there were several college scouts who had expressed interest in her athletic ability, and her guidance counselor helped us identify scholarship opportunities that could make her dream of attending a 4-year university a reality. I had worried that the financial cost of hiring a private investigator would set back Emma's college fund significantly, but several community members quietly contributed to help offset those expenses. Our small town had rallied around us in a way that reminded me why I had chosen to raise Emma here rather than in a big city. Emma began talking about her future with a confidence and clarity that amazed me. She wanted to study education and eventually become a teacher, inspired by several of her own teachers who had shown her kindness and support during difficult times. "I want to help kids who might not have stable families," she explained. "I want them to know that they can still succeed and be happy even if their situation is not perfect." For my part, I found myself letting go of fears and insecurities that I had carried for years. I had always worried that I was not providing enough for Emma, that my limited resources and small-town lifestyle were somehow holding her back. Stephanie and Richard's criticisms had played into those fears and made me question whether I was truly doing what was best for Emma. But watching Emma reject their offers and fight to stay with our family had shown me that what I had given her was far more valuable than anything money could buy. I had given her security, consistency, unconditional love, and the confidence to stand up for what she believed in. The legal drama had also brought some unexpected benefits. The social worker who had investigated our case was so impressed with Emma's maturity and our family dynamic that she recommended us as a potential foster family for other children who needed stable homes. While Emma and I were not ready to take on that responsibility immediately, it was something we planned to consider once Emma left for college. As Emma's senior year progressed, acceptance letters began arriving from universities. She had been accepted to several excellent schools with partial scholarships, and her dream of attending college was becoming a reality. The day she received her acceptance letter from Oregon State University with a full academic scholarship, we both cried with joy and relief. Emma would be able to pursue her education without the crushing debt that so many students face, and she would remain close enough to home that we could maintain our close relationship. "None of this would have been possible without you," Emma told me that evening. "You sacrificed everything to give me opportunities, and I will never forget that." But I knew the truth was more complex than that. Emma's success was not just due to my efforts over the years. It was due to her own strength, intelligence, and character. She had faced a difficult test during those months with Stephanie and Richard, and she had passed with flying colors. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that Stephanie's return had actually been a gift of sorts. It had forced Emma and me to articulate and defend the values that were most important to us. It had shown us that the bond we shared was stronger than blood, stronger than money, and stronger than the manipulations of people who did not understand what family really meant. Emma had learned that she could trust her own judgment, even when facing pressure from authority figures. She had learned that wealth and status were not the same thing as happiness or security. Most importantly, she had learned that love is not something that can be bought or demanded, but something that must be earned through consistent actions over time. As for me, I had learned to have confidence in the choices I had made as Emma's guardian. I had learned that providing a child with love, stability, and moral guidance was more valuable than providing material luxuries. I had learned that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you are born into. The whole experience had also taught us both about the importance of community and the power of standing up for what is right. Emma's friends, teachers, and neighbors had rallied around us when we needed support, showing us that we were part of something larger than just our immediate family. As Emma prepared to graduate from high school and begin the next chapter of her life, I felt nothing but pride and gratitude. We had weathered a serious challenge together, and we had emerged with our relationship stronger than ever. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not having children of my own, if I feel like I missed out on something by devoting my young adult years to raising my sister's abandoned daughter. The question always surprises me, because it suggests that Emma is somehow not my real child. The truth is, that becoming Emma's mother was the best thing that ever happened to me. She taught me what unconditional love really means. She showed me that family is not defined by genetics or legal documents, but by the daily choice to put another person's needs before your own. Stephanie may have given birth to Emma, but I was the one who raised her. I was the one who stayed up all night when she had fever, who helped her through friend drama and homework struggles, who cheered at every soccer game and school performance. I was the one who earned the title of mother through years of consistent love and sacrifice. What have you learned about family from this story? Have you ever had someone try to disrupt your life for their own selfish reasons? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please give this video a like if it resonated with you, and do not forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding strength in unexpected places. Share this video with anyone who needs to be reminded that the bonds we choose can be stronger than the bonds we are born with. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we create through love, not the ones we inherit through blood.